Hello and welcome to Uncomfortable Conversations, where we focus on topics that are uncomfortable. First we focus on the issue, then we get into the facts, then we focus on the messaging. We're going to talk about the police, specifically the dichotomy of law and order culture here in the United States. My activism background is gun violence prevention. So I have been very used to both partnering with police departments to educate about safe storage and lobby against bad gun bills like permitless carry, while simultaneously calling out police brutality as gun violence. So when I hear complaints that focus more on why defund the police is a terrible message because it's confusing, it can't be explained, and doesn't work because affluent or rural counties don't have issues with police, it makes me wonder why we are doing the right-wing media's job for them. Why are we talking about whether our slogan should be demilitarize, refund, defund, or reform? Why aren't we focusing on this country's relationship with law enforcement rather than arguing over how to phrase it? We chatted in our messaging video about how we don't have the right to control how someone else tells their story. We talked about how the conversation was the important part. So this video, we're going to dive deeper into the conversation about law enforcement, the history of training and reform, how money is spent, the reality that both communities and police face, and the way we can all stop arguing over slogans and focus on the facts. So first, let's take a look at the relationship between law enforcement and communities. Let's use Collin County, Texas as an example. It's located just north of Dallas County and one county south of the Oklahoma border and is both affluent and rural. On June 5th, 2015, an officer in McKinney slammed and pinned down 15-year-old Dejiria Becton and pulled a gun on the group of teenagers coming from the pool. On December 31st, 2018, David Han Wong died in custody of Collin County after saying he needed medical assistance and wanted to go to the hospital. On February 16th, 2021, 18-year-old Plano resident Rodney Reese was walking home on an empty road during the Texas ice storm when police approached asking if he wanted a ride home. Despite repeating multiple times that he was good, he was detained and spent the night in jail. On March 14th, 2021, Marvin Scott III was in Collin County Detention Facility after being arrested for smoking a joint. He was strapped on a bed, held down, and pepper sprayed, leading to his death, which in April was ruled a homicide. Whether your county is affluent or rural or anywhere in between, that in your personal experience does not reflect the community's relationship with law enforcement. The immediate reaction is a call for reforming and training law enforcement. And in fact, yes, reform has been called for and attempted several times over the last few decades. Unfortunately, regardless of which attempt it was, no accountability or consequence occurred for the perpetrators, and the whistleblowers were the ones that were fired. The Atlanta Police Department officer who murdered Rashard Brooks was trained in de-escalation and cultural awareness just 2 months prior. The Minneapolis Police Department had attempted to institute reforms, including training sessions, as an alternative to disciplining their officers, and in 2016 did a rewrite of its use of force policy after federal officials recommended weeding out officers who had repeated complaints. That same year, Philando Castile was in the passenger seat of a car his girlfriend was driving, with her 4-year-old daughter in the back seat, when he was killed in front of her during a traffic stop. In 2020, George Floyd begged to breathe as a police officer kept a knee to his throat for over 9 minutes. His killer was put on trial and found guilty. So what has training and reform looked like, and why is it failing? An article in Police Chief magazine states that the Little Rock Police Department Academy went through its final phase of accreditation for law enforcement agencies called biased policing, and was granted the Gold Standard of Excellence in July of 2018. They shared that their requirement was that officers participated in a 1-week in-service training each year, with 2 hours during the week devoted to the topics of diversity, inclusion, equity, and bias. A 2015 survey of police academies found that recruits spent 8 hours each on de-escalation, crisis intervention, and use of force training. As comparison, they spent 58 hours on firearm training and 49 hours on defensive tactics. An ABC article from July 2020 reported that there are roughly 18,000 separate police agencies and no national standards for use of force training. When use of force is criticized, the right-wing media often brings up the danger of policing. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the top 10 fatal lines of work are fishing and hunting, logging, pilots and flight engineers, roofers, construction, refuse and recyclable materials collectors, driver and sales workers and truck drivers, iron and steel workers, farmers and ranchers, and ground maintenance workers. Let's dive into that last one. Between 2015 and 2019, 570 police officers were fatally injured. 1,045 groundskeepers had fatal occupational injuries. The police shot 4,927 people to death, and 59,117 people in the United States were killed by gun violence. Now let's talk budget. On average, most cities spend 25 to 40% of their budget on police. A Texas Tribune article reported that Austin, Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio each spent more than $434 million from their general funds on their respective police departments during that 2020 fiscal year. Since 2000, Texas reported revenues through 2019 being $781.6 million over 18 years of reported data from civil forfeiture. Police union CLEAT, C-L-E-A-T, Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas, warned that cuts to police funding could increase crime. And on June 27th, 2021, Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced that he just signed a law that will penalize Austin for defunding the police. So the next question becomes, what do police do, and what is their funding spent on? A New York Times report revealed that about 4% of time for police is spent on violent crime. This is corroborated by an Eastern Kentucky University Police Studies report and a U.S. Department of Justice Perspectives on Policing report from 1988, so the number appears to have remained consistent. I'll reference the DOJ report a few times. It was a publication of the National Institute of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice, and the Program in Criminal Justice Policy and Management, John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University. So it's a really fascinating perspective directly from the DOJ over 30 years ago. It reported that typically less than 5% of the force was engaged in serious crime-fighting effort, and answers the natural next question, what is the remaining 95% of the force doing with deployed in patrol cars, responding to calls for service, and investigating crimes after they have occurred, which CLEAT in the Tribune article confirms as the same answer today. The DOJ report took a different approach than they did, however, with the statement, these tactics have limited effectiveness. What remains unanswered is the consequence of shifting a whole department to a radically different style of policing. It continues to say problem solving and community policing both require a greater degree of decentralization than the current strategy. They depend more on the initiative of the officers and a close rather than distant relationship with the community. These are quite different than the administrative emphasis of current strategy, which is centralization, control, and distance from the community. So what actually happened in Austin? The city council had unanimously voted to redirect funds for unfilled positions, overtime, and 3 cadet classes toward fighting homelessness, funding 911 services, the forensic lab, and internal affairs, among some other city services. This segues into the next segment of this conversation, the partisan use of law enforcement. The Black Lives Matter protests following George Floyd's murder called out the prevalence of police brutality in communities of color and demanded change. The right-wing media arm responded to this movement by adopting and marketing the slogan, Back the Blue and Blue Lives Matter. So what did that look like in practice? In August 2020 in Boise, Idaho, armed and unmasked Trump-supporting protesters shattered a door at the state legislature and overwhelmed police to enter a coronavirus hearing. Though they were carrying weapons and shattered a glass door while protesting, Law enforcement officials declined to intervene or arrest any of them. After repeatedly violating coronavirus restrictions, a bar owner from Staten Island, New York, hit a police officer with his car while evading arrest. And of course, on January 6th, 2021, the nation watched as thousands of insurrectionists stormed the Capitol. They were actually openly confused when officers stood in their way, assuring them they were on their side. When it became clear that the Capitol and Metro police officers were going to prevent them from entering, they were brutally beaten with shouts of "traitor" and "you're going to die tonight." In fact, over 150 police officers from the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington were injured, from bruises and lacerations to concussions, rib fractures, smashed spinal discs, burns, and a heart attack. One lost the tip of the right index finger, another had their eye gouged. As of June 2021, over 17 remain out of work due to injuries, and 38 tested positive for the coronavirus after being exposed to it from the insurrectionists. One officer was declared dead that day, 2 died by suicide in the weeks following. 21 House Republicans voted against awarding congressional gold medals to the U.S. Capitol Police officers who literally put their lives in the line during the January 6th insurrection. Republicans and their right-wing misinformation empire have been undermining law enforcement at every turn, even as they sell thin blue line promotional items. Here in Texas, police departments across the state spoke out vehemently against the permitless carry of firearms. Ignoring tens of hours of testimony, the Republican Congress passed it, and it was signed in by Republican Governor Abbott, taking effect September 1st. National Democrats have voted for health care, pensions, COVID-19 relief, bulletproof vests, and victim compensation for police. Police groups supported the American Rescue Plan COVID relief legislation, and President Biden wants to increase funding for the Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS, program by $300 million. Republicans, including House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, voted against funding for the COPS program in 2015, 2014, 2012, twice in 2011 and 2009. Every single Republican voted against those bills. This literally is why calling attention to and arguing over slogans is meaningless, and why the conversation is what is important. Don't argue over how to frame inequality and inequity. The slogan is irrelevant. None of us should tell someone trying to share their story that they're not doing it correctly, or that how they're describing their struggle is uncomfortable. And the right-wing media does not need your help. They will literally find or create anything as a talking point. If someone brings up the slogan and you really do want to know how to respond, ask them what specifically concerns you and talk to them about the reality of law and order in the United States. Alex Vitale, sociology professor in Brooklyn, argues that we are using police to manage problems of inequality and exploitation, and in 1988, the DOJ actually argued something remarkably similar. Arresting people and using authority was real police work. Mediating disputes, mobilizing communities, and badgering other city agencies for improved services was social work. The consistent thread through the decades has been that we as a country need to systematically question the specific roles that police currently undertake. In other words, police cannot and should not be doing it all. It comes down to us, from the local level to the national level, evaluating what police are used for and what alternative methods we should be providing. Stop trying to figure out what the slogan should be, could be, would be, and whether or not you or someone you have or may talk to will like it. Focus on the issues, the facts, how to uplift and support our communities. Call out the hypocrisy of the right-wing propaganda arm. Use their lies to expose the truth. Tell your state and national elected officials we need actual rehabilitation for addiction rather than nonviolent offenders spending years in prison. Monitor your county's commissioner's court to see where your tax money goes. Let them know you're concerned about the lack of funding in community mental health and social work. Request wider and more accessible support for homelessness from your city and your county. Find out if there is a citizens review or advisory board for your police department. Some cities offer these as civilian oversight of police officer conduct. If there is, ask to join it. If there isn't, ask to put one in place. Find your local violence interruption program and ask how you can help, whether it's time, spreading awareness, or donations. And find resource lists like this that allow you to take the burden off your police department and get people the help that they need.